Welcome to today's video. It's the first of my August wrap-up videos. Again, it's late in the month for me doing this. I was really hoping that once the kids went back to school and we got back in a good routine, that I would catch up on these videos and be able to do more than just TBRs and wrap-ups, because I feel like that's all I've done for months. But yeah, it's been a bit chaotic. My father-in-law is in for a biopsy today, as I'm speaking. On a mass on his pancreas, and then I've got a friend who started chemotherapy yesterday for breast cancer, so it's all just been a bit there's lots going on and I've just not found the time. In fact, I want to tell you about my friend with the breast cancer. She has been blogging the whole way through so far, from finding out about the cancer to the lumpectomy and things like that, fertility treatment and all sorts of stuff. She's been explaining it in as much detail as possible and talking about how it feels in real life rather than just in the leaflets you get from the hospital. So if you know anybody that it might help or who would be interested, then I'm going to put the link down below. It's called My Blue Boob. She explains why as well. And it's just fantastic. She is an absolute beautiful warrior that is smiling away through this whole shit thing and trying her best to help other people. So yeah, the link is below in the description. Anyway, back to books, because that's what you came here for. I read 17 books in August. I just had to pause the video and check on my list because I didn't realise it was that many. I was like, it can't be, surely I must be wrong. But yeah, 17. And they're pretty much 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, no, that's not right. There's more than 17. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Ah, no. Yeah, so there's 10 actual books that I've read, and then obviously 7 audiobooks. So the first one I'm going to tell you about was an ARC that I received from NetGalley, and it's called The Dead and the Dark by Courtney Gold. This is about a small town called Snakebite in Oregon, I think it was. We follow Logan, whose dads are famous ghost hunters. They have their own TV show, things like that. They move into Snakebite, so-called, doing research on the town and trying to see if there's anything they can use there for the Ghost Hunter TV show. However, there is teenagers from the town that have gone missing, and it only seems to have happened since the dads moved into that town. So there's somewhat kind of creepy link. They aren't generally accepted into the town. There's also some underlying kind of subtle homophobia going on in the town as well, which adds to the problems. And then we've got Ashley, who lives there, and her boyfriend is one of the people that has gone missing. She finds that despite Logan being a bit standoffish, let's say, that actually Logan is the only person who will listen to her when she says that things just don't feel right in the town. There's this really creepy presence since things started happening. So it kind of just follows this it's like a mystery type story where you're trying to figure out what is going on and where these missing teenagers have got to. Are they dead? If they're dead, what happened? Are they not dead? It was just so yeah, it was actually quite a good YA book. I really enjoyed this one. I did feel like it started off a little slow, maybe, but Logan isn't the most likeable of protagonists, but it picked up, and I did really get into it. So it's kind of this thriller mystery type scenario, but then you've got all these weird supernatural goings on, and then you've got the homophobia to deal with, and the tension in the town. It was just really good how it was done. I did like how it wasn't just full on supernatural, paranormal, and like really unbelievable or hard to get your head around. It was just like these really creepy little things inserted into like a thriller story initially, and then it gradually builds. So yeah, I do giving this one 4 stars. Next up we have got Let That Be a Lesson by Ryan Wilson. This is a professional memoir of a teacher, and it was just fantastic. I absolutely love this book. It was everything that I wanted it to be. Ryan did a fantastic job of talking about all the different aspects of teaching. It wasn't just like stuck on one mindset. He talked about things, you know, like sad scenarios, children that were going through struggles. He talked about bad behaviour and kind of like the escalation in bad behaviour that we seem to be seeing, where it's becoming more and more dangerous within schools. He also talked about his relationship with his colleagues, friends that he made, and then the funny stories, the funny side of teaching, and also the successes of pupils that he has taught that did really well, that have gone on to good things in the future. It was just so well rounded, this book. It really did give like a full insight into teaching. Obviously we all understand that all that's going to happen in teaching, it's not a one-track thing, but there was even things that I hadn't realised, such as how the like government policies, when they change, how drastically they change and how that affects schools, rather than thinking of it from like a pupil point of view, how that affects teachers and their teaching and their lives. And we all know that like teachers do work longer than school hours, you know, that they're taking books home to mark and they're preparing for upcoming classes, things like that. But it just kind of reinforced that, and just it gives you this good sense of like, actually teachers do a lot, you know, we should really appreciate them. And yeah, it was just absolutely spot on. There were times when I was laughing out loud. I mean, my favourite story out of that book, because I picture things that I read, like I can see it happening like a video in my head. And one of the stories that Ryan talked about was when he put on some kind of film for the students, hadn't realised there was a pretty graphic sex scene in it, and suddenly jumped up to stop it during mid-sex scene and couldn't get it to stop, and the projector was projecting the sex scene onto his face because he was stood in front of it. And like, I can just literally picture this guy stood there with this sex scene happening on his face, and like all these pupils like, oh my god, what is going on? Yeah, it was just, fantastic book. Please go and read this one. Obviously I gave it 5 stars. And then we've got another one that I absolutely loved in August, and that's The Dark by Emma Horton. This is a thriller that's set in remote Antarctica, and it focuses on a research team. They are kind of in like this research facility out there, and they get dropped off, and then there's no way of getting out or anybody else getting into that area for like about 6 months because of the like severe winter weather that they have. So we follow Kate, who was an A&E doctor and decides she needs to just do something different with her life and get out of where she is, and she applies for the job as doctor on the research station. She is actually replacing a doctor who died whilst out there. He had like some kind of accident and they needed a replacement super quick. Kate is the replacement. She goes out there and everything seems great, but the longer she's there and the more she kind of gets to know the people, and people start letting slip things about the death of the previous doctor, the more worried she is that it actually was a murder. And so she goes like secretly kind of investigating. Now, what I particularly liked about this book is that Kate is an unreliable narrator, and I do enjoy that trope. She has a medication problem, or a prescription drug problem, let's say. She'd had a car accident previously, years back before this, and she was taking prescription painkillers, and she got addicted to them. And while she is out in Antarctica, she starts, like, she runs out of her own supply and ends up using the stuff out of the medical centre, and more. She's using it more and more. So she becomes increasingly, I want to say, erratic and yeah, unreliable. So we're kind of seeing things from her perspective, but we never know if it's really what's actually happening or if it's her, like, mind twisting things or whatever. And I just really enjoyed that. I ended up, like, absolutely convinced that every single person was a killer at some point, because it was just like there were things where the author would lead you down a path and I'd be like, oh yes, so they're the killer, and then it would like stop and then they'd lead you down another path with another character, and I was like, oh, so maybe they're the killer, and then it just kept doing that every character. I was just like, oh my god, I don't know what's going on, and I love it, what the hell's happening? It just, and the atmosphere of this book, oh my god, talk about creepy. In Antarctica in the winter, they end up where they've got 24 hours of darkness for so many months, and that is gradually approaching as the book goes on. So the team are already becoming quite antsy and uncomfortable and a bit like lower in mood with this permanent night approaching, and yeah, it just adds. And it was just so creepy, claustrophobic, trapped, and you know, things are happening and you know nobody can escape. Oh my god, I love this. 5 stars, easily. Then on to another thriller that had me like, in fact, I think I just assumed everybody in the book had some kind of dark side to them. Yeah, it was The Chateau by Catherine Cooper. Now, I was really looking forward to reading this because, as I've mentioned before, I have previously read The Chalet by Catherine Cooper and really enjoyed it. So I was looking forward to this one, and I'm so glad I did. So this is set in France, and Aura and Nick, married couple, they buy a chateau in France to start a new life with their children. It needs a lot of renovation, the chateau, but they're kind of like gradually working through that to get it up to like being able to use it as a B&B for tourists. In the meantime, they're also trying to get themselves like settled into the expat community that's in the local area. And I really liked how every single character that you met, like the expats and people giving advice and all that, all seemed to have like this I don't know, like a dark side. I just want to say dark side because that's what it felt like at the time. Like they were putting on a really good front initially, and then like the real true selves was discovered as you went through the book. And then all these weird things started happening in the house, you know, like lights turning on randomly in the middle of the night, music playing suddenly at 2 in the morning when everyone was in bed. And you start kind of like suspecting other people that you've kind of come across so far in the story, like who's doing this to the family. Then they go to a Halloween party held by another expat, and one of the guests gets murdered, and it's a guest that the couple have come to know. And you just don't know who to trust throughout the whole thing. So I mean, I've just said that I liked the unreliable narrator, and this was just the unreliable every bloody person in the book. And it was actually, I did enjoy it again because it leaves me guessing, like, oh, could they be doing this? Could they be doing this? And the author Catherine Cooper does such an excellent job of making you feel a certain way for a character before then absolutely destroying those feelings by showing you the other side to their personality. It was just really good, and it did like kind of have me wanting to go back to the book. Like when I put it down to go and do other things, I was thinking, oh, I can't wait to get back to reading it, to eventually bloody figure out what's going on. And yeah, so I ended up giving this 4 stars, and I really do recommend this one. Next up, next up, we have Cows by Matthew Stocker. I'm not going to explain really the ins and outs of this book, let's say, because it is extreme, gory horror with some really I don't even know how to describe this bloody book. It's sick. It's just sick. It's really sick, and I have no problem with that. If you've watched my other videos, I don't mind reading things that are a bit sick and twisted. But yeah, this was probably the sickest book that I've ever read in my life. And like I've just said before, when I'm reading things, I see them as a movie in my head, and that is not such a great ability when you're reading a book like this, because I've now got visual images that are burned into my brain that I may never get rid of. And I'm not even going to tell you what they are, because it was just horrific. And in the horror book groups that I'm on Facebook, everybody talks about this certain page, and I think it's at about the 33% mark or something like that. I can't remember it now. And everyone was like, people will say, oh my god, that scene at 33%, for example, and everyone like, oh my god, yeah, oh, it was just horrible, it was sick, it was, you know. And then other people like, oh, that was the point where I DNF'd it, I could not go any further, I was almost vomiting in my mouth and all that. And I was just like, okay, so I got to that point, and yes, it was absolutely horrific, but I managed to keep reading. I am not sure what that says about me, but yeah, I did. I read the whole book. I completely finished it. It's so hard because I have no problem with sick and twisted if there's a point to it. So if anyone's read The Troop by Nick Cutter, there's parts of that are really gruesome, but they're like, I don't know, they're like part of the story. Like they go, and it adds to the story rather than just being there. And this whole book, I don't know, if you took out the sick crap, there was just no story left, if that makes sense. There was huge scenes of twisted stuff, and it just felt like it was just sick to be sick, if that makes any sense. I don't think I'm explaining this very well. I know what I mean though. But yeah, it was just like, I don't know, it was just a book of sick instead of a book with a story that had some sick stuff. It was just the whole book. So yeah, I don't think I would read another by this author. I purely read it because people said they couldn't get past it. It was the sickest thing they've ever read. And so I was like, that sounds like a challenge for me. Yes. And okay, I read it. I have my opinions on it. I'm done. So yeah, look it up if you want to. And yes, it is about cows, but not in the way that you might think. Anyway, on to other books. Back to thrillers. We've got The Unwelcome Guest by Amanda Robson. I listened to this as an audiobook from NetGalley, and I have read another book by Amanda Robson. For the life of me, my brain won't remember it right now, but I have, and I enjoyed it, and I specifically requested this book because of the author. This is a good domestic thriller. Now I say good, not great, because for me it was just very slow paced. I like things to happen in books. I like to, I don't know, like build and build and build, and then boom, and then you get the after effect, and it kind of was a bit like that, but kind of wasn't. Instead of going boo, it kind of just went like gradually. Yeah, so we've got a family who have their mother-in-law living with them. No, it's the husband's mother, the wife's mother-in-law. There we go. And she is the mother-in-law from hell. Like, I thought I had the mother-in-law from hell. But yeah, this bitch beats all the rest. Seriously, she is a nasty piece of work. She's really cunning and conniving and sly. She does not like her husband's wife at all, and she's just so determined to split the family up. She's trying everything. And as the story starts, the family get a new nanny. Now, Caprice is the mother-in-law. She decides this is like the perfect storm moment where all the planets have aligned, ready for her to do her master plan of breaking up the family. And she just kind of like sets about different things, like that, encouraging the nanny to develop a crush on the husband, her son. She even is encouraging the husband's brother to like go and act on his feelings because he has a crush on Saffron. And so she's just like trying to like get the couple split up in any way possible. And then it just kind of escalates. It just felt very unbelievable, and like, well, you kind of, it's not supposed to be. It's a thriller. You're supposed to like, it's supposed to be something that could happen, and it just wasn't. And I think that ruined it for me, along with the slow pacing. And yeah, I just ended up giving it 3 stars. However, what I did really like about this audiobook was that it was read by a full cast of characters. And that was particularly great in this book because there was so many characters right from the beginning that it could have easily got confusing. But because they all had different voices and accents, and it was just easy to kind of distinguish who was who and try and keep that in your mind. So that was done very well. Then I listened to Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This is a book that's been on my TBR for like years, since it was first published. And that's because it's post-apocalyptic and I love that kind of stuff. However, this book fell very flat for me. The way it felt reminded me of Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam, and that's because nothing happened. I mean, like literally nothing happened in the whole book, so it felt like it was a bit pointless. Because like I've said, I like things to happen, and then, you know, we get like some kind of resolution after the event, and this book just didn't do that. I don't even know what to say. So it like kind of starts with a performance of King Lear in a theatre in London, and in the middle of that somehow there's an apocalyptic event and the world just crashes basically. And then we kind of jump to years later, and it's just a different world, you know. It's like really dystopian. There's like pockets of survivors, little tiny like societies they've set up for themselves, lack of transportation, lack of technology, all that kind of stuff. And we follow like a band of travelling musicians and like theatrical people. I don't know what even to call them. And they like travel around from group of survivor to group of survivor kind of thing. What do they call them? Settlements, I guess. And they provide entertainment, and people, you know, pay them or give them food or whatever, and that's what they do. And that's it. Literally, that is it. That's all that happens. I could see that there were clever links between characters. So you might see a character who was on stage in King Lear, and then years later you find out how they're linked to the characters in the more current time when it's dystopian or post-apoc, whatever. That was obviously done well, but the actual story as a whole just bored me to tears. Not quite as much as Leave the World Behind, but almost as much. So actually this got 2 stars instead of 1. But yeah, I will definitely not be reading another book by this author. I feel like it's very literary, speculative type stuff, rather than, I don't know, rather than stuff I like, because I don't do well with that kind of stuff, obviously. So yeah, I was just really disappointed, because it's a book that I'd wanted to read for so long, and then it just kind of flopped. But never mind. Then I listened to The Phantom Prince by Elizabeth Kendall. This is obviously true book about Elizabeth's relationship with Ted Bundy and how that ended. Let's just say. So yeah, that was, I've got to say, obviously I know who Ted Bundy is, and I have limited knowledge of what his crime was, or crimes. So this was incredibly interesting, seeing like another side of it, where because obviously she got into a relationship with him, and she's talking about her feelings for him and how he behaved, and you know, the life together, and you don't normally get that perspective. So somebody who's such a notorious serial killer, all the books tend to be about the crimes, the life they led, you know, the trial, whatever, you know, the victims sometimes. But this was just so fascinating, seeing the other side of things, and it was just creepy. Like it made me kind of think, oh my god, you could literally be in a relationship with a serial killer and not know. Because I guess part of us would be like, oh, you would know, you would so know, but no, you wouldn't. I really recommend that. I gave that 4 stars. Next up, I listened to Beyond the Tracks by Michael Wright. I think that's how you pronounce his surname. I think by now we all know what these German concentration camp novels are about, and so I was looking forward to this one, because I do enjoy I do enjoy them, even though I say I don't like historical fiction. I enjoy these particular very small subgenre, like niche books of historical fiction. And this was one, oh, I was so conflicted when I was listening to it and when I was rating it on Goodreads. And it's because the narration is horrendous, like really, really bad. So we have one narrator throughout the book, but obviously there's a whole host of characters. But somehow, somewhere, the decision was made to try to put weird voices and accents on for each character, and that it was just so overly theatrical, it felt, that it just completely drew away from the actual story. I spent a lot of my time scoffing and rolling my eyes at the narration instead of becoming absorbed in the book, and that was a big problem. I can't even, I feel like you just need to listen to it. Like, it started out okay, but then as more characters came in, it was kind of like the narrator thought, well, I need to distinguish these characters somehow to make it easier for the listener, and so they just decided to give them all really bizarre accents and really bizarre voices. Like, for instance, we follow Jacob. Here is the main protagonist in this story, and fine, his narration was fine, but then his dad and I think one of his friends had really, really strong, like, Cockney accents. They just sounded like proper London geezer. It was like bordering on comical. It just, and that just didn't work. And then he meets a girl in the concentration camp, and she had, weirdly, a really strong Yorkshire accent. It sounded like. I mean, every time that character spoke, I couldn't get past the accent and the voice. And yeah, it's a shame. What I ended up doing when I was rating the book on Goodreads, because obviously you have to give it a star, and I've still not written the review because how to word all of this, how to word all these thoughts and feelings. I'm giving it 4 stars because the story itself was interesting, and what I particularly liked is that it wasn't just another concentration camp prisoner's story. This was from the perspective of somebody who worked alongside the Nazis, not as one of them and not as like on their side, but you know how they recruited some prisoners to be like supervisors of certain cabins or certain groups of other prisoners, and Jacob was one of them. So his life was slightly less bad than normal prisoners, and that was interesting to see that side of it. So yeah, I really, really liked that. It was just that the audiobook just destroyed the story. So I'm trying to split the two to do the author justice, because the story was interesting and well written, just the audiobook went wrong. And that is all of the books I'm going to tell you about this time. Sorry it's been really long, but I appear to have read quite a lot of books in August. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and please like and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon in another video. Bye.